In this video, I'm going to talk you through how I painted this painting of rocks in the river. I had a few objectives for this particular painting. One was obviously to paint those rocks being out of the water and in the water at the same time. And then the other part of the painting that I was keen to experiment with was this reflection here on that side, because it's got a hard edge and then wet in wet inside that shape. This is a shorter version of the full-length video tutorial that's available on my Patreon page. The link's in the description. So I've jumped ahead to painting the river, and I'm starting with some clean water. And I've also masked out some of the rocks so that I don't have to meticulously paint around them with my first wash. I start off with some burnt sienna and a little bit of quinacridone rose for the part of the river that's closer to us, because this is where we can see the ground of the river. And for my blue, I'm using ultramarine and a bit of Prussian, reflecting the sky, the surface of the water as it recedes into the distance. You can use any kind of blues that you like. Cobalt would work as well. Paint the top half first, but then I'm going to pull that same blue straight on top of the burnt sienna. Now you might wonder, why do I do that? Why don't I just mix the color? Why do I layer it? If you can see, there's a bit of a interplay happening between the blue and the reddish brown color, and the pigments just settle in a different way that way, and it's a different effect. You know, it's up to you to mix the colors on the palette first and then apply them. And now I'm going to demonstrate how I lift out the pigment. Use a stiff brush for that. There are specific eraser brushes you can get which are really short and stiff. Also, depending on which colors you use, some lift better than others, and different kind of paper. And I'm just going to time lapse that. It's the same process: wet the brush, wet the pigment, rub it very gently, and then use a tissue to lift it out. Now that I've got my lifted out rocks, I'm going to cover them again with that same reddish brown mix. But now I'm going to try and turn them into rocks that are submerged under the surface. And I can do that with a couple of techniques. One of them is to lift out some of the top and also adding some shadows. And I'm going to keep all the shadows consistent of all the rocks, as you will see. The light's coming sort of from the top left, far the distance, so all the shadows are closer to us. And mostly at the bottom of the rocks, just to give them an edge. This will help with the three-dimensionality of the rocks. And you can see here I'm lifting out a little bit of the pigment where the light hits the top of the rock. Same technique is now going to be used for all of those white patches that I've lifted out just before then, and turning them into rocks. And I've added some and removed some. And the biggest challenge here is probably to create a pattern that doesn't look repetitive. Make sure that the painting is bone dry before you remove any masking fluid, or you'll start smudging and rubbing pigment into your white areas. And now I'm going to cover those rocks with the raw sienna as well. So I want to connect visually the rocks that are on the surface with the bank, and make sure that they stand out or are very different from the rocks that were painted that are under the water. And same technique there. Light on top and then dropping it a darker edge underneath. This is a technique that I've done a video on before, just specifically on rocks. That's one of the techniques, and you can use that for small rocks, big rocks. But I'm also trying to vary the colors a little bit, so not just the one raw sienna all the way through. Variation is a very important design principle in painting. And to make sure that I didn't draw or paint the same rock 50 times, I had a couple of reference photos of pebbles and rocks and riverbanks and things like that, just to make sure that this looks organic and natural and not too repetitive. This has to feel quite random, and that is actually not the easiest thing to do. Okay, I'm speeding up. The next part, I'm just going to repeat this same process over and over again. Drop in some different colors as well. Repetition not just in shape and size, but also in the color and slightly different tones as well, some darker, some lighter. Now as I'm moving towards the distance, I'll have less and less detail in my rocks until they're really just random flecks of color, and mostly actually just a shadow side and leaving the top white, just to further the impression that it's quite a sunny day. A few splatters, couldn't go without it, but perfect for creating the illusion of pebbles or sand even. And here's the finished painting. I hope you find it useful to paint your own rocks in the rivers. And if you want to watch the full tutorial, as I said at the beginning, it's available on my Patreon page. And if you could hit the like button, that would really help me out and would be amazing.